Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if neglected Naruto x lusamine harem Pokemon. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by FestiveBoi, link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1, Girlfriend's Wish. Naruto was currently standing across from Chairman Rose, someone who was considered to be one of the most influential people of the Galar region. Although his back was turned to him, Naruto could clearly see his reflection from the shiny glass panels that made the very top observation area of Rose Tower, which gave a beautiful view of the thriving city of Winden, the largest city in the Galar region. Stroking his chin and looking like he was in some deep thought as Rose's eyes had gained a faraway look in them, he then hummed before turning around to face Naruto, his expression rather calm, but a smile was seen on his face. Chairman Rose is a tall and handsome tan-skinned man with black hair, green eyes, and neatly trimmed facial hair. Despite his svelte appearance, he also has a round portly belly, which was hardly visible thanks to the tight clothing he wore. Clothing-wise, Rose has one ear pierced and wears a sharp grey business suit, as befits his status and wealth. His suit consists of a grey vest with numerous black buttons, a grey overcoat with a single gold button, a white shirt, and a red tie. He also wears classy grey pants that match his suit, along with a gold and black belt, pointed red and black shoes, and a gold watch on his wrist. While he may look like a businessman, he was more than that. He owned multiple companies around the region, also has his own organization, obvious founder and creator, and is even the chairman of the Pokemon League in Galar, which is why the people of the region always call him chairman. I do believe that idea would be great and should be considered, however, I cannot just decide to implement this, I will need to talk to the board of the Pokemon League. He said, his voice was rather charming to most, which is another reason for his popularity. I understand, I just want the trainers to have another incentive to train to their fullest potential. Naruto said, nodding his head. He knew that it might be a long process to get this implemented into the league year, but it would be worth it and it will bring even more motivation to all inspiring trainers. He should know, everyone dreamed to become a champion of the region, he did as well, and it was through hard work and dedication that he finally managed to complete his goal. Naruto was a rather tall and handsome teen, for an 18-year-old anyway, and stood at 5'8". He had nicely tanned skin that he got from his father's side of the family, as his mother's side of the family were rather pale, and had a roguish mop of golden blonde hair that spiked in every way imaginable, and had bright cerulean blue eyes, and had whisker-like markings, 6 of them, 3 on either cheek. Clothing-wise, he wore a simple black zip-up jacket with orange trimmings around the sides and on the zipper, and around the edges of the pocket. Since the zipper was undone slightly, one could see the simple sport workout shirt he wore underneath. On his wrist, he had a Dynamax band on that allows his Pokemon to utilize the power of Dynamax in certain areas. He also wore jeans that matched his jacket, just with the orange trimmings being a little darker. Holding the jeans up was a simple Pokeball, which all held 6 shrunken Pokeballs containing his Pokemon team, and to top it all off, he wore simple sneakers that were red in color with white laces. He was offered the reigning champion kit by Leon after he bested him in a hard-fought battle, but he politely declined and allowed Leon to continue wearing it as it was iconic and suited him more. Yes, having an Elite Four challenge would be great, we just need to find suitable trainers for the place, and we will need to work out a structure and the other pieces necessary for it to work out. Rose said, looking Naruto in the eye as he did so, I believe that Leon would be a fantastic choice, but who are the others if this were to be passed? He questioned. I don't know, sir. Naruto answered after a moment of silence, shrugging his shoulders to go along with it. He never really thought about the other members who could possibly join Leon in the ranks as Elite Four. Myself and Leon will keep a lookout for anyone with potential. He stated to the chairman. Nodding his head at that, Chairman Rose once again turned around, deciding to take in the gorgeous view of Winden once again. Thank you, I will try my best to get this past the board. Nodding his head in understanding at that, Naruto understood that was a non-verbal go-ahead to leave. Thank you for your time, Chairman. It's been my pleasure. Do say hi to Marnie for me, tell her that I am in discussions with some builders and contractors about upgrading Spikemuth. Rose said, looking at Naruto through the reflection of the pane glass in front of him. Will do. Was Naruto's reply to that before he turned around and made his way towards the elevator, leaving Rose alone to his thoughts. As Naruto exited Rose Tower, he was instantly greeted by the sheer warmth of the sun beating down upon him. Now, by all means, it wasn't unnatural for Galar to experience a mild heat here and there, but it still was rather rare in itself, as most of the days were either overcast, raining or even snowing in some places, so having sunlight with very few clouds about was a nice and rather relaxing change. It was a weird thing to think about, but when he was completing his journey, he would brave through the weather conditions, no matter what it was. Hell, he would even go out in a thunderstorm and train his Pokémon up to become strong, while also improving their durability during these conditions, so no one could manipulate the weather to get a small advantage, and that really helped during Raihan's battle. However, now that he was the champion of the region and one of the largest figureheads in the region, with the next fewest being Leon, who was the last champion who was undefeated before he finally fell in battle, and Chairman Rose, because of this new title that he was given, he had a lot more responsibilities and well, his private life, which he did enjoy, was always known to the public, barring a few select details, so he didn't get to enjoy the quieter simple life anymore. That was one of the downsides that came with being champion, and probably one of the youngest champions might he add, as he was certain the only champion that was younger than him by a landslide was by a kid named Red, who also disappeared without a trace. Becoming champion at the age of 11 was insane to even think about, not even a year into his journey, and he had already become what many children dream about, but the amount of snooping around that will happen when he is spotted somewhere will be intense. How could a child who wasn't even in his teens yet be ready for something like this? Shaking his head from those stray thoughts that entered his head, he looked around the area. Well, it was rather grandiose, with beautifully kept and trimmed gardens and simple pathways that separated the grass and gardens to the building. It wasn't exactly a place that random people would visit without a purpose, so it was rather quiet most times, unless something was happening directly at Rose Tower, plus to get here, it either required a flying taxi or to use one of those monorail systems. Speaking of flying taxis, there was one waiting for him right near the sign that gave a brief explanation on what Rose Tower was all about. Rose must have sent one for me. Shaking his head from those thoughts at the rather eccentric chairman, Naruto made his way over towards the taxi service, and he still couldn't help but feel a little fear from the massive Pokémon that delivered the service. The Pokémon that helped with the traveling of said flying taxi was a Corviknight, which is a large avian Pokémon resembling a raven and stands at the monstrous height of 703, which towers over many Pokémon and humans. Most of its body is a lustrous black, but its lower beak and legs have a matte color. Corviknight's feathers are tempered with steel. Its mantle, breast, belly, flanks, and scapular feathers are smooth and resemble plate armor. Corviknight's talons, head, and upper beak are similarly armored. It has a crest above its eyes that resembles a crown and a ruff of feathers on its throat that resemble a beard. Corviknight's eyes have white pupils, red irises, and black sclerae. Naruto, glad to see you again. Looking in the car that Corviknight was perched upon, he saw one of the members of the flying taxi service, although they prefer to be called cabbies. Well, it seemed to be odd that most of them looked alike. He had to guess that it was same situation when it came to Nurse Joy's, and they either must be cousins that look alike barring one or two features, or some poor family decided to have so many kids, yet they all look the same. Gordon, nice to meet you. Naruto greeted with a small wave as he walked towards the car, flinching a bit under the fierce gaze of the Corviknight. I'm guessing Chairman Rose got you here? He questioned before opening the back seat of the car and hopping in and closing the door. Once he entered, he sighed lightly, glad that he was somewhat safe from the terrifying Pokémon above him. Yep, even paid for your trip as well. Nice guy he is. Gordon said before he exited out of the front seat himself. Don't be too scared of Corviknight, they may look fierce, but they are loyal once you gain their trust, just like any other Pokémon. He added, patting Naruto on the shoulder lightly through the open windows of the backseat. So, where to? Rolling his eyes at the fact that Gordon and the others always said that about Corviknight, well, it was true, it didn't stop them from looking fierce and terrifying. I'm heading to Spikemuth, could you drop me off outside of the city? He answered, while questioning the man about to climb on top of the saddled Corviknight. No problem, just sit back and enjoy the ride. I suggest we will be there in about half an hour. Gordon said, flashing a small smile before Naruto heard some grunting as he managed to climb upon the steel bird saddled before using some of the safety measures to make sure he was the safest up there. Right. He sighed out before shifting his position a little to make himself as comfortable as he could. Sometimes, he really regretted not having a smaller Pokémon that might be able to enjoy the ride with him. Oh well, at least there were some magazines and even a small video device in which he could watch whatever he wanted. Turning on the video device, he quickly shifted through the channels to try and get something that might catch his interest during this flight. Oh? He muttered out, watching for a few moments before leaning back in his chair. This will be a little interesting as he managed to switch the channel over just in time for one of the Lumious Conference semi-finals happening. Ladies and gentlemen, it is finally time for the semi-final match between Ash Ketchum from Pallet Town facing off against Sawyer from the Hone region. Panto and Hone in the Lumious Conference. Interesting. Naruto thought to himself, his interest piqued from this tidbit of information. Maybe this flight wouldn't feel so long after all. Have a good day, Naruto. Gordon said from the saddle of the massive Corviknight. True to his prediction, it did in fact take pretty much half of an hour, give or take a few minutes to get from Winden to the edge of Spikemuth. Getting out of the vehicle, Naruto stretched his back after sitting down in the rather cramped space. You too, Gordon. I hope you have a fantastic week, maybe we can catch up sometime when you have a break. Naruto suggested, turning around and craning his neck upwards to look at him. Alright, but I expect the drinks to be on you. Gordon stated, before looking down at the Corviknight. Alright, Corviknight, let's head to HQ. He said, giving the large steel type a small rub on the back of its head. Rolling his eyes at the eccentric cabbie who he could call his friend, he watched as the Corviknight flapped its mighty wings and slowly started to ascend at an even pace in order for it to not drop the car it was carrying with its large talons or to not knock the human off on its back. It took a few seconds of steady and slow rising before it got to a safe level before it started to fly away into the distance. He is something. Naruto thought to himself with a small chuckle before turning around and seeing probably one of the least developed or cared for towns in the entire region of Galar. The small town of Spikemuth, while it was home to the first ever dark-type gym in all of the regions, it didn't have that much to it. Other than that, it was a simple small town that homed maybe 100 people at most of them being members of Team Yell, a small team that liked to cheer on Marnie or peers and had a simple theme of punk rock, as was the music that was always playing in that town was from that genre. Hell, it seemed like the town was accurately made within an abandoned warehouse that hadn't been touched in who knows how many years, but that just added to the uniqueness of the town itself. It was a shame that it wasn't built on a power spot, that meant that you couldn't Dynamax any Pokémon, and it was the only normal gym badge that one would experience in this region. A shame really, as Marnie had a wicked cool Gigantamax Pokémon, one that could easily beat back most Pokémon if used correctly. On that note though, the semi-final battles of the Lumious Conference stuck within Naruto's mind. While all participants had to be strong to make it all the way to the semi-finals of a large league like Kalos 1, two of the names stuck out like a sore thumb to Naruto, and those two participants were Ash Ketchum and Elaine. When he watched the battles between those two, he was surprised to see the strategy that Ash possessed, utilizing Pokémon that people may not use all that often and make it work for him. Interesting strategies were also involved on the fly and seemed to have been thought up of on the spot. Which is a good thing. Sometimes when things aren't going your way, you make them with those sort of bold and unpredictable strategies. The one thing that surprised him the most however was the fact that the close bond that he had with his Greninja. That sort of power-up or mini-evolution or however you call it was something that was groundbreaking and most have had some scientists around the world flabbergasted and speechless. He also noticed how Greninja seemed to take on some prominent features of Ash himself, with the facial changes and the slight color change. It also didn't escape him from the way Ash acted when his Greninja got hit, it was also him that flinched and clutched around the area that Greninja got hit on his own body. Was that the downside to having something like that? Did you feel the pain that the Pokémon felt? Were they truly that connected that they could share senses, despite Greninja not being a psychic type and with it being unlikely that Ash was a psychic user? On the other hand, Elaine was truly a powerhouse. He was quick and efficient and didn't seem to waste a single move when it came to battling. Every move was planned out and another plan was already thought up of if that failed. His team was well-rounded, with some bulk thrown in with some agile attackers. While those Pokémon were indeed impressive, the one thing that stood out about him the most was his Charizard. The amount of power that Charizard had must have been mind-boggling. To add the fact that it could Mega Evolve into Charizard X meant that they also had a very strong bond with each other. They also seemed to trust each other to the fullest, bringing out the potential between himself and Charizard. Dare he say that maybe Leon and his Charizard, which could Gigantamax, might have some trouble facing off against Elaine's Mega Charizard, which he also learned was part Dragon type, making it a Fire and Dragon type, and that got rid of the one thing that every Charizard had as a weakness, Rock types. Naruto truly believed that those two could become great Elite Four members in the future, and he just hoped he could pick them up before anyone else spots their potential and decides to act on it. I need to find out more about them and see what I can do about this. He thought to himself, making a mental note into researching them. It would be easier to see the history of both the trainers and find the best way to come into contact with them, whether it be by the regional professor or someone else that was reachable. If those two could become the Elite Four members, along with Leon, who he would ask this about at a later date, then it might be something for the world to look out for once Galar can finally hold their international tournaments or finally participate in one. Galar was just finally made into a fully fledged region a couple of months ago, allowing the region as a whole to join in with Kanto, Johto, Hone, Sinnoh, Unova, Kalos and Alola. Which was why some of the smaller islands or regions sometimes allowed themselves to link up with other regions so they can call themselves an official region. It was also due to Galar's odd rule for the age in which someone can actually become a Pokemon trainer. Not only did they have to complete Pokemon school, in which they entered at the age of 8 and finished when they were 15, same if they were homeschooled. They also had to spend at least 6 months after graduation with a licensed Pokemon trainer or professor, then before their 16th birthday, they had to take one final test, and if they passed, they could become a trainer by their 16th birthday. If they failed the test, then they would have to wait another 6 months to do the test again, only this time it would be different from the last test they failed. He had to presume it was because of the wild area, which has very powerful, yet untamed Pokemon that could attack at any moment, and if they were young or not educated enough, then it could lead to serious injuries, or possibly even death. Shaking his head from those thoughts, he eventually snapped himself out of his little funk to find that he was at the entrance of Spikemuth, which happened to be one large and old roller door that allowed entrance into the small town. As soon as he stepped through, he could already feel the difference in temperature between the outside and from this town, since this entire town was confined and was under the large roof of the warehouse. It did have a tendency to repel the weather from the outside, which could either be a good thing or a bad thing depending on the seasons. Since it was in summer, it did leave a lot of heat outside, leaving the town rather chilly at times. Looking around, the town hadn't changed all that much since the last time he was here. It was still rather run down with the buildings being chipped, cracked, and in some places they were even broken, such as some of the glass on said buildings. While the town was rather dark with no natural lighting barring near the massive roller door, it was lit up with many different colors from the nearby neon lights coming in various colors, some in pink, others in blue. There was even some yellow ones as well. One of the largest buildings in the town was the local Pokemon Center, which looked to be in the best condition out of all the buildings. To be honest, I am glad this place is finally getting the upgrades it needed. Can't have my girlfriend's hometown looking like this for the rest of our lives. He thought to himself, idly wondering how the people of this town would take the news of everything being rebuilt and redesigned. Would they want it, or would they want to keep it the way it was? To be honest, he was sort of glad that this town was rather linear, as it made it easier to travel through and not get lost, like he did when he entered Winden, Hammerlick or even Motostoke for this first time. In fact, it was due to him getting lost that he actually met Marnie in the first place, and somehow, from that one chance meeting, they eventually became a boyfriend and girlfriend. He could still remember the meeting like it was yesterday, despite the fact it was over 2 years ago that this happened. Flashback. When people say that Motostoke City wasn't large or it was easy to navigate, Naruto would gladly met them and give them a simple backhand for those comments. Since he wasn't born or lived in one of the larger cities of the region, as he actually grew up in the rather isolated town of Stow-on-Side, where there was a desert to the south and the rather large and somewhat dangerous forest of Glimwood Tangle to the northeast. It was a small town that relied heavily upon exports from the other cities to keep the supplies up for the subpar population of a few hundred people. In fact, the town was so small that everyone knew each other. The best part of the town was that the crime rate was extremely low due to the fact that there was nothing really worthwhile to steal, and for the fact that if one person spotted you, then it was basically over and you were caught easily by the police force. So going from that tiny community and having to adapt to the massive city of Motostoke was rather challenging. Everything seemed so large in comparison, and the community of the city wasn't as great as Stow-on-Side due to the larger population of the city, or as the residents of Stow-on-Side like to call the residents of Motostoke, Winden or Hammerlock. City slickers, which was an insult if they were to be called that. Well, do you have any idea where to go, Cindy? Naruto turned to face his recently evolved starter Pokemon, Raboot, the evolution of Scorbunny. Raboot is a small humanoid rabbit-like Pokemon that stands at 2 tall, meaning it didn't even come up to Naruto's knees with a grayish-white body and red eyes. Its fur is mostly red and black, with the upper body being red and having a collar that covers most of its mouth, while the lower half is black with a tuft in the center of its belly, resembling that of a turtleneck sweatshirt, which can be used as pockets. The front half of its feet are red. It has a yellow bandage on its forehead and a small, fluffy white tail. Although, to make sure people knew it was a female Raboot, Naruto bought a sweet little accessory for her, with it being a small black and blue ribbon, which was tied gently around one of its rather cute droopy ears. To say Raboot loved that ribbon would be an understatement. He could remember how when Raboot accidentally unwrapped the ribbon and it landed on the ground and some unfortunate ninjas got too close to it, she flipped and delivered a rather powerful blaze kick to the poor Pokemon. In a sort of way to apologize to the small wild Pokemon, Naruto healed it up and apologized to it and made Raboot apologize as well. So, it was very surprising when Ninjask actually joined the team, as it thought that it would become stronger if it was caught, rather than trying to become strong by itself. So, that was how Naruto caught his second Pokemon, and he also made sure that Cinder's little ribbon was tied on properly, yet gently enough so it didn't tug at the fur on her ears. It turns out that she was quite sensitive around her ears. Shaking her head in the negative fashion to her trainer, she quickly hopped upon his shoulder, and with her weighing hardly anything, just a little under 20 pounds, it didn't really cause that much of a shift required. Shame. Naruto hummed out, looking along the large and rather wide streets of the city. If he was being honest, he was glad that he didn't grow up in this sort of environment, as everything seemed so distant and were focused on profit rather than community. More. Pico. Naruto jerked himself to a stop, nearly causing his poor Rabu to stumble off her perch on his shoulders. Looking down at the ground, he noticed a short chubby rodent Pokemon. The features of the small rodent were stubby arms and feet, a pair of pink circular cheek pouches, a very tiny nose, two almond-shaped ears with a single fur tuft under each, and a primary body color separating two areas of fur which cover the arms, ears, cheeks, and eyes, and zigzag inward towards its face, stopping at the waistline. A Morpeko? He questioned, knowing of the fondness some girls seemed to have for this Pokemon. He also noticed that it was in its cheerful mode, otherwise known as full belly mode, which meant its body is a creamy yellow in color, its eyes are circular and black with large white pupils, the fur on the left side of its body is black, and on the right side, it is brown. A single bucktooth can be seen protruding from its smiling mouth. Smiling to the small rodent Pokemon, Naruto crouched down and extended his arm down, allowing the tiny and cute rodent up onto his person. "Hey, little one." He greeted it. "Are you lost?" He questioned, allowing the small rodent Pokemon to stay on his free shoulder. He didn't see the nasty look his Raboot was sending the poor critter. Peck. Shaking its head in a negative fashion, the Morpeko made its interest known. It wasn't lost, it just liked the look of him and felt drawn to him for some odd reason. Morpeko? Hearing the rather soft and feminine voice coming from behind him, he turned around and was met with a girl who had very interesting style. A style in which he definitely hadn't seen before, and it just looked right on her. The girl in front of him was a slim young girl with striking emerald green eyes, dark black hair, and very pale skin. She has a strange hairstyle, with a partially shaved side, tufts of hair that resemble horns, and messy twin tails tied with red ribbons. Her bangs are on her left side, partially covering her eye. She wears a studded black gothic jacket, a pink mini dress with triangular holes cut into the bottom, and matching black and pink boots with sharply spiked heels. He also noticed that her boots have 3 large silver studs and an upwards pointing toe. For accessories, she wears a black choker around her neck with a circle and 3 spikes outside of it and a red diamond-shaped ear piercing. She also carries around a small red backpack that matches her hair ribbons. All in all, she looked like one of those goth girls that he sometimes saw online when they were rather popular a few years ago. Yet, this girl in front of him didn't look that intimidating or seem that unemotionally like he saw those other goth girls. Sure, she did look like someone that one would go out of their way to talk to, but he could tell that there was more to her than meets the eye. "See underneath." The underneath was a quote he heard when he was but a little kid, and yet, he still remembered it vividly to this very day, and basically lives by it. He wouldn't judge one from the looks on the outside, he would judge their character and how they act. "Is this your Morpeko?" Naruto questioned, although he already knew the answer. It would be a good way to strike up a conversation, and maybe get directions to where he was meant to be going. "Huh? Oh yeah." She replied softly, tearing her gaze away from his own and looking at the Morpeko that was looking at her from its little perch on his shoulders. Seeing it was the response he wanted, he gently grabbed the Morpeko much to Raboot's delight and handed the small rodent over to the girl. With her emerald eyes blinking a few times, confusion evident in them, she gently grabbed her Pokemon from him. "Thank you." She quietly mumbled. It was so soft that Naruto almost didn't hear it, but he did, and he smiled at the shorter girl. "Sorry if she bothered you." "She normally doesn't do that," she added on. Waving off her concern, he merely have her and I smile. "No problem, you looked a bit awkward, so I returned it to you, and the cute little thing wasn't a problem at all," he said, seeing as how the girl looked a little awkward and didn't know what to do. It was almost like she had never been in that situation before or have had to start a random conversation with a stranger. "By the way, do you know where I am meant to be going? I'm afraid that some people aren't helpful," he explained to her, a little bit of hope in his voice as he did so. Shifting so that the Morpeko was resting on her shoulder, her rather nervous gaze was locked onto him. "Where did you need to go?" she questioned quietly, trying her best to keep eye contact with the boy in front of her. "Well, I'm looking for directions to Motistic Stadium. I'm starting my gym challenge, and I've never been to the larger cities before." Taking a moment to digest that information, she allowed herself to have a surprised look on her face. "Oh, you're taking on the challenge as well?" she asked. It was news to her. "Yep," he proudly said, before looking at her and finally realizing what she said. "You're taking it on as well?" he questioned. Maybe he had just found a rival for this challenge. "Yeah, I am." she said, before her gaze shifted elsewhere, mainly towards the northeastern area of the large city. I'm heading there myself, and I know the way, so I can lead you there if you want. Nodding his head with a bright smile on his face, can I? That would be great. He said rather happily, glad to know that he will have directions to the stadium, and even better, someone was willing to take him there because they were heading to the same place. Talk about being in the right place at the right time, I'm Naruto, by the way. He introduced himself to the shorter girl, feeling it would be best to introduce himself and not be a total stranger anymore. Marnie, was her soft reply, taking Morpeko off of her shoulder and carrying her around with the rodent close to her chest and wrapping her arms carefully around it, preventing another escape chance. Well, it's nice to meet you, Marnie. He said, following a few paces beside her. Yes, things will go well, and he would have a rival to always push himself further and maybe allow her to push herself even further along. Then flashback. Smiling to himself at one of the many meetings that happened to be between himself and Marnie during their journey and eventually became the building blocks of their relationship, he was suddenly stopped as some young children were in front of him, looking at him with their eyes full of awe and amazement. A little further behind them, he noticed that their mothers were running up towards them. Looking down at the little kids, he noticed how they were rather young, maybe 5 or 6 years old, and they were both holding a poster of him and his Pokemon team, whilst one of them were holding a green and blue striped cap that looked way too big for the child. Hello little ones. He greeted out, crouching down low so he could be closer to their height and make him look less scary to them. Sometimes, the little kids were scared of his height when they met him in person. The kids seemed to have been overtaken by excitement as they had not spoken a word to him, they just had their facial expressions stuck like they were, and they seemed to be shaking in sheer joy at him having talked to them. I'm terribly sorry, sir. One of the mothers spoke out, gently grasping her daughter's shoulder, making her look up at her mother with a sheepish smile on her face. Yes, they saw you coming through from our apartment and couldn't help themselves and came sprinting down here as fast as they could. The other mother said, gently grabbing his son's shoulders. It's not a worry. They are just excited. It's not every day you get to meet the champion in person. He said, ruffling the hair of the two children in front of him. Finally noticing the marker they had in their hands, he got what they wanted. Ah, so you want me to sign your stuff? He questioned, gently grabbing the marker from the girl's hand and taking the small poster. Yes, please. The small girl muttered out, speaking for them both as the younger boy looked a little too shy at being in front of him, even with his mother behind him, the confidence wasn't there to be talking to his idol. Chuckling quietly, Naruto with fashioned ease scribbled his signature and autograph, making sure to leave it where the autograph was visible, even going as far to create a little smiley face with whisker marks on the cheeks, and handed the poster back to the girl, who in turn, hugged it close to her chest and gave him probably the brightest smile that he has seen on a kid. Thank you. She squealed out before turning around and showing her mother her new sacred treasure. Now, for you, little one. Naruto said, gently grabbing the cap from the boy and placing his autograph and signature on it and doing the same thing that he did with the little girl in making a smiley face with whisker marks on its cheeks. Putting the marker cap back into place, Naruto handed back the large cap to the small boy, who was now looking at it with widened eyes and seemed to have tears of joy in his eyes. Thank you. His voice may have been quiet, but the sheer amount of emotion in it was astounding. Smiling to the kid, he gave a small thumbs up before standing back up and looking at the mothers of the children, who had split attention on the children showing off what they got into him. They both had kind smiles on their faces as Naruto had just made their day, possibly even made their month with that. Here. I don't think the kids will be taking this with their hands full. He said with a small chuckle as he witnessed the kids run back into the apartment building, holding their stylized belongings close to their hearts. The mother on the right, who had her skin a few shades darker than the one on the left, took the marker from him. Thank you, you just probably made their month with that. With that being said, she leaned in and gave him a quick peck on the cheek. Don't worry about it, I just did what I could. Naruto said, waving it off like it was nothing, suddenly remembering what Chairman Rose said earlier. Oh, Spikemuth might be getting the attention and upgrades it deserves. I'm sure that all residents will know more in the weeks to come. Naruto said to both women, who looked a little surprised at said information. Have a fabulous day, the both of you. Naruto said, giving the woman on the left a small hug before heading down the path. He still found it weird that he hadn't seen any Team Skull members in their uniform, nor had he seen a strand of hair on Marnie so far. She always seemed to know when he was coming to Spikemuth. It was kind of creepy to him, must have had a challenger. He thought to himself, that must have been the only option as to why he hadn't seen Marnie or any straggling Team Skull members. Boom. The ground-rattling explosion followed by the chorus of cheers, both male and female, only further proved his point about a challenger being there to challenge Marnie. Whoever it was must have been strong and very close to completing the challenge itself, as Marnie was the 7th gym leader in the challenge, replacing her big brother at the end of last year. It was a fact that most of the later gym leaders accepted, with the difficulty of the gym challenge and the different challenges that are set for each individual taking part of it, that they might not get a challenge at all. Most trainers would be disheartened after getting defeated by the other gym leaders, with most of them failing to even complete the challenge that the 6th gym leader, Melanie, set for them. So, whoever was currently challenging Marnie had to be really skilled and determined to keep pushing forward through all of the hardships and challenges. In a way, he was looking forward to seeing who it was. Coming to a large open area, he noticed that there was someone standing by the closed gates that led to the battlefield, watching on with calculating eyes, almost like she was watching for any openings or mistakes happening between the challenger and Marnie. "So, what has been happening?" he suddenly questioned, coming to a stop a few paces away from the girl and watching the battle himself. It was obvious that the girl beside him was rather surprised at his sudden appearance, judging by the way her eyes widened proportionally and from the way she suddenly stiffened when she saw him. The young lady was rather pretty, although he was still faithful to Marnie. That didn't mean he couldn't appreciate others. She stood at about 5'5" and had short brown hair that was shoulder length, some of it was hidden by her hat, which was dark green and had a fluffy white pom-pom on top of it. She had rather pale skin with warm brown eyes and a rather cute button nose. She was currently wearing the gym challenger uniform, which consisted of a white long-sleeved sport top with blue trims around the sides and had gray vertical lines with a black button collar, which then led into white gym shorts that also had blue trims around the sides. On her right hand, he noticed that she was a white and blue glove and had a Dynamax band just below it. "And Naruto," she exclaimed, excitement evident in her voice. "Well, my rival, Hop, is challenging Marnie. It was rather close, but now he is taking the lead." She couldn't help but allow her voice to rise a little, which was a little quirk of hers. Raising his brow at that, he was surprised to hear that someone was able to keep up with his girlfriend in a battle, as her entire team was strong and hardly had any real weaknesses despite one or two typings, so to hear that someone was winning against her was a nice surprise. "I see. Hop is Leon's younger brother, right?" he questioned, wanting to know if it was the same Hop that Leon loved to talk about. "Yep. Me and him are basically neck and neck with the gym challenge. Our final goal is to defeat you," she said, pumping her fist in the air as she did so. Chuckling lightly at the enthusiasm that this girl had, along with the confidence that was heard in her voice. It wasn't too confident that it sounded arrogant, but it was enough to tell that she believed that she could do it. "I see. I will be waiting for either one of you in the finals," he simply said, before turning his attention back to the battlefield where the smoke was finally clearing. Challenger Hop's Dubwool and leader Marnie's Grimmsnarl are both knocked out. Due to the league rules, the challenger has won. Naruto smiled softly at that. Well, it may have not been a win, it was still a draw and didn't look bad on one's record. While he did feel bad about his girlfriend not getting the result she wanted, she still gave it her all. Looking at the battlefield, he saw Marnie and Hop both return their exhaust Pokemon to their Pokeballs for them to recover, and they both met in the middle of the battlefield, with them shaking hands in a show of sportsmanship. He could see the Team Yell members were still being as eccentric as ever, with most of them crying, while the others were trying to be tough and not show tears in front of their idol. With some words that were inaudible due to the distance they were at, he saw Marnie hand over her badge, which would fit into a small locket, which proves how many leaders you have beat and how far in the journey you are. That meant that Hop was one step away from Winden, and most likely the girl beside him who was cheering and whooping in joy at seeing her rival win get the 7th gym badge. Looking over at the girl once more, he saw her giving a smile so bright that he swore her teeth were gleaming. Shaking his head at that, he opened the gate himself and gestured for her to enter and celebrate with her rival. "Go on, celebrate your rival's victory." With his permission granted, it didn't take long for the girl to rush inside the arena, basically tearing through the arena to get to Hop, who was still standing in the middle of the field after Marnie took to her side of the field. She was probably feeling a little upset, but that was a part of battling. You win some and you lose some, it was all about how you strove forward that mattered, and every loss is a learning experience. Walking with Marnie after having her Pokemon healed at the Pokemon Center, they now found themselves coming towards the house that they lived in. Well, it wasn't too large or luxurious, it was enough for the both of them and their Pokemon to have enough room to roam around and to keep active. Marnie hadn't changed much appearance-wise from when they first met, except for what she was currently wearing. As she was wearing her uniform, which consists of a pink and black midriff-bearing tank top with Team Yell's symbol on it, matching black and pink skin-tight leggings with some rips and the number 960 on them, and black and brown shoes. She also wears a single glove with the same color as her shoes and has a gym tattoo on her arm. She may not have the biggest chest of all the girls that he had seen, but in Naruto's eyes, those mid-B cups were great the way they were. He also had to admit that those tight pants she was wearing were perfect and showed off her ass well. He might have to convince her to buy more of those tight pants, only for her to wear around the house, as she was his, and he would only want her to show off those curves to his eyes only. Looking out of the corner of his eye, he couldn't help but frown when he saw his girlfriend acting all down like this. Nudging her lightly to get her attention, he smiled at her. "Hey. Don't be down in the dumps, you did fine." He reassured her, before gently grasping her hand into his own. She frowned, looking away from his and instead turning her attention to the ground below, finding it more interesting currently. "I still lost," she muttered out. Well, she wasn't one for getting down about losing, she still felt bad. She let her fans down, she felt like she let her brother down, felt like she let him down, and most importantly, she felt she let her Pokemon down. "You didn't lose, sure, it was a tie, but you gave everything you had, that's what matters," he said, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Plus, that must have been your what? Third gym battle?" He questioned, seeing her nod shyly at that. She still didn't like what she had to wear during the battle, but rules were rules, so, that means you haven't gotten used to the pressure yet. Sure, being in the finals last year was something, but being a gym leader is something else entirely, so don't feel bad about drawing or losing. Everything is a learning experience. Seeing her nod her head at that, but still not being herself again, he decided to do something different. Gripping her shoulders lightly and making her stop in her tracks, he went in front of her and looked her in the eyes, moving his hand and cupping her chin and tilting her head up, he asked, "Come on, where is the sweet yet tough girl that I fell in love with?" She would never let a loss get to her, it would only motivate her to get stronger. Blushing a little at the contact between herself and Naruto, she shyly looked away once more. However, that wasn't possible when Naruto tilted her head back for her to look directly into his bright cerulean-colored eyes, hiding. She muttered out, before squeaking a little once she felt a pair of lips come into contact with her forehead. "Come on, let us get our minds away from the battle, and let's do something fun," he said, playfully flicking her nose. Beep. In one swift movement, he managed to lift her up and spun her around and placed her on his back, where on instinct, she moved her arms around his neck and interlocked them, making sure to get a grip during the surprise piggyback ride. She couldn't help but smile at his eccentricities. She leaned closer in, resting her cheek on his neck whilst keeping a firm grip on her boyfriend. He was always there for her and always cheered her up, and to be honest, she was glad that they met in Modestuk and kept on running into each other and the most random times. Despite her appearance, her rowdy fans and her attitude, he still kept with her, always motivating her and never judged her. It was one of the many reasons why she fell in love with him. Despite being in their late teens, she knew that they would be together for a long time. Even when they both had their first time together, they felt a connection like no other. It really was like opposites attract. She was cold and somewhat distant to others, yet he was bright and cheerful and always helped others when he could. Sitting on the back porch of their shared house, Naruto and Marnie were sat on one of the few outdoor settees they had. It was a simple high-back settee that was made of soft leather, so it was comfortable to lounge in for long periods of time without it having some problems on your back once you stood up. They weren't doing much bearing snuggling together and enjoying some of the sunshine beaming down upon them, and out in the rather large backyard, they had all of their Pokemon out and about. Some of them were relaxing by the pond or simply resting under the shade provided by the many trees growing around the area. However, some of them were mingling around and chatting to each other in their own pocket speech it seemed like. That wasn't the case for two certain Pokemon of Naruto's, mainly his Cinderace, or Cinder or Cindy depending on the mood, and the other one was Naruto's Gardevoir, who he nicknamed Anna, which was short for Anastasia. Those two Pokemon in particular were looking at Naruto and Marnie, jealousy was clear in their eyes, while Cinderace's was more noticeable with the way she seemed to sending this dirty look to Marnie, who snuggling in with her trainer, she also had a pout on her face, which was rather adorable to see from a fully evolved starter Pokemon. Gardevoir on the other hand, while she was sending rather jealous looks towards Marnie for being in that position, she wasn't displaying any other signs of anger or jealousy, she was just smiling at them. She just couldn't stay mad or feel any negative emotions towards her trainer, it just wasn't in her nature to be so, even when she was a little upset with him being with Marnie, instead of coddling them like he used to when they weren't fully evolved or merely baby Pokemon. However, Marnie saw the look she was getting from those specific Pokemon. Normally, there would be a third Pokemon sending her these jealous looks, however, she couldn't spot the Zoroark in the general area, so maybe she was relaxing under the shade further in the backyard. Naruto. She spoke out suddenly, looking from her position in the crook of his neck. He hummed out, his eyes were closed as he enjoyed the feeling of the sun's rays beaming down on him and enjoying the feeling of it soaking into his skin. I know that we can't see each other or be with each other as much as we like. She began, wanting to take her time explaining this to him. Did you ever consider that some other girls may like you? She asked. As she spoke this little statement, she made sure to make eye contact with Cinderace and Gardevoir. I know, many females, young and old like me, however, none of them compare to you. He said, opening his eyes and looking out of the corner of his eyes and looking at Marnie with a confused look on his whiskered visage. Why bring this up? He questioned her. Shifting a little so she got out of her comfortable position to sit up beside him, she turned in her position, making sure that she was turned to him. Well, did you ever consider that your female Pokemon may love you like I do? She questioned. Naruto blinked for a second, seemingly in shock at the question that Marnie gave him. Looking over to where she was previously looking, he noticed that as Cinderace and Gardevoir were looking at him, their eyes locked onto each other, and he eventually sank into the settee, producing a rather audible exhale. I know, but I'm with you. I don't want to be unfaithful to you, no matter if it is with another female or my female Pokemon. He said, grasping her hand into his own and giving it a loving squeeze, whilst giving her a quick peck on the lips. Plus, Pokophilia is wrong and against the law. Naruto pointed out. That action did cause Cinderace to huff and look away from the scene, with Gardevoir cooing her name and giving the shoulder of the rabbit Pokemon a gentle squeeze, seemingly calming the Pokemon down. Feeling touched at how deep his loyalty and faithfulness was to her, Marnie leaned in and gave him a smooch on the cheek. I don't mind if it's with your female Pokemon, no one but us has to know. She told him, bringing her index finger to her lips as if she was keeping something secret. She then leaned in and placed her mouth right next to his ear. They love you dearly, even I can see that. She whispered, sending pleasurable shivers down his spine from her warm breath. I will allow it, as long as I am the only human female. Is that clear? She said, her voice getting a little more aggressive as she grabbed his balls roughly, making her threat known. See crystal. He spoke out, his voice a few octaves higher than before. Nodding her head at that, she released his balls much to his relief before looking toward Cinderace and Gardevoir, who were not paying attention still, sighing to herself. She decided to let those girls know. Cinder, Anna. She called out, calling the Pokemon by Naruto's given nickname. Hearing their names called, they both turned around with confusion in their eyes, along with jealousy in Cinderace's case however, that quickly turned to excitement once Marnie pointed to Naruto, then to them, and gave them a thumbs-up gesture. It was very obvious what that meant to the two Pokemon, as fierce blushes colored their cheeks, with Gardevoir shifting happily in place and giving an eye smile as she placed her dainty hands to her cheeks. Cinderace still had the blush on her cheeks, however, she also huffed and stuck her nose in the air, like she was trying to hide her excitement. Although it didn't work as her foot was rapidly tapping along the ground, creating small embers to be created upon the grass, she was also keeping one eye locked onto Naruto. She also might have licked her lips a little. Turning her attention from Cinderace and Gardevoir, Marnie looked back to Naruto, licking her lips lightly as she stretched herself out, making sure to entice Naruto with her shapely rear end. It helped that he was a leg and ass man instead of a breast man, and seductively whispered, now, why don't we enjoy ourselves, to make up for lost time? She said, pulling her pants down just a smidge and showing off a hint of her laced white panties to him. Gulping lightly and suddenly feeling hot under the collar, he suddenly grabbed her and picked her up with relative ease, all the hormones rushing through his body and making his pants rather uncomfortable at the moment with how tight they were getting. Why, aren't you a naughty girl? He teased her as he shifted her in his grip, carrying her like a princess. I believe we should. He said, before picking up the pace and heading towards the back door. It was going to be a pleasurable time, that was for certain. Meanwhile, Cinderace and Gardevoir saw what was happening before looking at each other, heavy blushes on their faces as they were silently communicating with each other before they both nodded their head and quickly making their way just before the steps to the back porch. Cinderace, in a display of athleticism, jumped from the grass below to the shingled roof above them, that was the second story a solid 6.5 feet up, and made her way over towards the window of Naruto's and Marnie's shared bedroom. Gardevoir soon followed, covering herself with a soft purple glow as her eye glowed the same color and landed gracefully and silently on the roof beside Cinderace. They were going to get a free show, and when it comes to the trainer they love so much, they wouldn't miss it. Now that they got the go-ahead from Marnie, why not watch without having the fear of being caught now that Marnie gave them permission? End chapter. Chapter 2 Cinderace's moment. It had been the last afternoon that Marnie had all but told him that he could explore the feelings that his female Pokemon held towards him, those Pokemon being, Cinder his Cinderace, Anna his Gardevoir and Astrid his Zoroark. Well, he wasn't all that scared to see how his Pokemon react to what Marnie said, he was scared about what would happen if this were to be made known to the public. It had taken a lot of talking about after they had their little private bedroom training, and lots of pleading from Marnie during dinner and after dinner, just before they went to sleep, and after Marnie kept on going on and on about, whittling away at his resistance, he had finally taken it into consideration, and even trying his best to come up with some plans in his mind, before he eventually falling into the sweet embrace of sleep, with him snuggling close to Marnie. Since bacophilia was balancing on the very, very thin line of illegal and legal, it was still looked down upon, and in the past, some people have even been punished when they got caught having these relations with their Pokemon, whether they be male or female. It didn't matter, however, since he was the champion and wasn't some other person in the world. They may not punish him as greatly, but it would be possible that he would lose his position as champion, and maybe a very large fine. And maybe even Marnie would be hit by fine as well, since she was the one who knew about it, yet didn't report it to the authorities. However, if it was indeed true that his female Pokemon did garner some form of attraction between him, he would be willing to take that risk, since it was someone's feelings that he was playing with. No matter if it was Pokemon or human, it still wasn't funny to play with and toy with emotions, as the consequences if something goes wrong was very high. Sighing to himself, Naruto shook his head, trying to get those thoughts and hesitation out of his mind, as he enjoyed the slight morning breeze washing over him, along with the early morning rays, to soak into his skin for the first time in hours. While some may think that he was crazy for being up at such an early time at the crack of dawn, he was used to this sort of thing while he was on his journey, and the breeze didn't affect him that badly, as he was used to the cold temperatures of Circhester and the small town before Winden. He also had finished a cup of tea a few moments ago, so that was in his system warming him up from the inside. Looking around the large yard that was able to hold their combined parties, they were fully grown Pokemon with different needs, so of course they got the yard as large as they could to appease their Pokemon. He saw that most of fire teams were fast asleep, the only ones who were somewhat active and awake were the Pokemon from Naruto's team, as they were more used to early morning training sessions. Although, he noticed that his Zoroark and Gardevoir were nowhere to be seen, which was odd as they were the ones normally hanging around Cinderace during the morning, with what he assumed to be some female Poké-speech gossip, along with the unique training sessions they held. Speaking of Cinderace, Naruto could see her practicing some kickboxing, along with her practicing her signature move. Pyro Ball, a move in which she juggles a pebble with her feet and she could transform it into a burning soccer ball. By putting a spin on the ball, it can launch attacks that its opponents struggle to evade, causing massive damage when it connects, also having the possibility of leaving a burn on the target, which will gradually weaken the opponent further. Currently, she was trying to speed up the process of how quickly the move could form. It was slowly coming together, but would take more time and practice to perfect different speeds. Cinderace is a bipedal, rabbit-like Pokemon and is moderately tall, standing at 407 with more height coming from her ears. Most of her torso and head, as well as her arms and tail, are white. She has long wide ears, the insides of which are yellow. Her eyes, which have red-orange pupils and wider irises, have a deep navy pattern below them and yellow eyebrows above them. These eyebrows connect at the nose, which is red-orange, and form a crown, which connects to the red-orange tuft of hair sticking out from her forehead. It has two whisker-like tufts of white fur on each side of her face. Over each shoulder is a navy patch of fur, which continue down the torso and connect at middle of the chest, creating what resembles a sports tank top. This navy-colored fur is also seen on her lower torso, creating what resembles a belt. The fur on her lower body is colored red-orange and resembles a pair of pants, with yellow pockets and ending in yellow tufts at the knees, with little tufts of fur on the backside of her thighs. Her ankles and feet are colored navy blue and tipped red-orange at the toes. On the underside of each foot, there are 3 yellow dots of fur, from which she fires flames when attacking. However, she did have one special feature, and that was the small pink bow wrapped around her ear, carefully a gift that she got as a raboot, and she had always made sure to keep it in great condition. Sighing to himself, Naruto got up from his sitting position and made his way over towards his starter Pokemon, making sure to be extra careful and quiet in order for him not to wake up the other Pokemon that were snoozing about the yard they were in. Cinder. Naruto called out softly, causing his Cinderace to stop what she was doing and turned around to face him, an unreadable expression on her face. Ace? Quickly looking at Cinderace, he saw that she was breathing rather heavily, meaning that she must have been practicing for a lot longer than he had actually been outside for. Girl, I want you to follow me. Naruto questioned, walking up to Cinderace and gently grasping her shoulder and gesturing for her to follow him. Although she was confused as to why her trainer wanted her to follow him, she still did it anyway. As she followed him a little deeper into the yard that was past a little makeshift training ground she had made for herself, she found herself in a wide open area, which was used as everyone's little training ground and exercise field, in which they would challenge each other to various things, such as sprints and running races, in which she was the fastest, and a little sparing area, so everyone could catch up to each other in strength. There was also a large body of water which was connected to another opening which allowed the water-type Pokemon access to the grounds as well. Her ears twitched as she heard her trainer move further in front of her, dragging her attention away from their little training and exercise area, and saw her trainer sitting on a small boulder in which some Pokemon could sunbath on and warm up when they were cold. "Cinder, I want you to be honest with me," Naruto said, gently yet firmly, not wanting to be lied to. She could also tell that he was serious due to the fact that she was called Cinder instead of Cindy. "Do you have feelings for me? Despite us being human and Pokemon? I know Marnie told me yesterday afternoon, but I want to know the truth from you," he explained further. Naruto watched as Cinderace's cheeks flared up, tinting the normally clean white fur into a deep red color. He also felt the general area heat up, along with some droplets of dew on the neatly cut blades of grass evaporate into the air. Nodding her head, she turned her head in order for Naruto not to see her like this. However, the blush on her fur was giving away her true feelings. "Cindy," Naruto softly said, gently scratching behind her ear, his fingers briefly running across the smooth fabric of the ribbon that he got when he was still a beginning trainer who had just started his Pokemon journey. "Listen, you need to know that relationships with Pokemon and people are frowned upon and is basically illegal," he said gently to his starter Pokemon. Naruto felt his heart break a little when he saw the reaction that his Cinderace made when he made it known about the complications of her feelings. Seeing her ears droop down and tears start to form in her eyes, along with her body shivering lightly, it wasn't a pretty sight. "Hey," Naruto gently said, rubbing the fur along her back, trying to get her to cheer up lightly. "Cindy," he gently called out, wanting to get her attention once more. Turning her head, Cinderace looked at Naruto, her eyes watering from the unshed tears that were threatening to fall down her face as she heard what her precious trainer told her. "Dear Arceus," even her voice sounded depressed, such a drastic change from the normally hot-headed and rather loud one as well. "Cindy. Well, it is illegal. Marnie did say that you and the others can pursue your emotions and feelings. We just need to keep it a secret in public. Who knows what will happen if someone were to find out," Naruto said. "Can I trust you and the others with this secret?" he questioned. Blushing a little, which made her white fur turn a beet red, along with having the temperature of the area pick up a little due to small flames being emitted from the bottom of her feet, she shyly nodded her head at that, her ears perking upwards as she craned her neck up to look her beloved trainer eye to eye. Chuckling lightly at the reaction, Naruto petted her on the head lightly, which in turn made his Cinderace huff a little at the sign of affection she was receiving. She even pointed her nose up in the air, like she was trying to not pay attention to what he was doing. The joys of having a Pokemon that had such conflicting moments in her personality. At times, she would get fired up by small signs of affection, although that tended to make her a little overconfident when in battle. It was something that he could work with. Then there were the other times in which he praised her or showed any other signs of affection to her, and it caused her to act like this, all Tsundere-like. He had to thank Marnie for that one, as she was one herself, although it had died down a lot since they started their relationship, and she managed to open herself up towards him more about her insecurities and some of her fears. Still, it was cute to see his Pokemon act like this. Although, he had to wonder sometimes, how did he always find his Pokemon with these personality quirks to them? His Cinderace was a Tsundere who sometimes enjoyed the praise and got hot-headed. His Gardevoir was someone who never seemed to be upset or show any signs of negative emotions. If she did, it was for a moment or two, before returning back to normal. And his Zoroark was a tricky one, not just because of her mischievous attitude, but she also had a tendency to, well, disguise as other members of his team to try and fool him. His male Pokemon on the other hand, his Ninjask was a Pokemon that sometimes acted like a little kid that just loved getting into fights and learning new things. His Appleton was a Pokemon that loved to laze about. He swore that he could give a Snorlax a run for its money, sometimes. And finally, his Araquanid was a rather battle-hungry Pokemon that loved to be in a fight with a strong opponent. Despite all of these conflicting personalities, Naruto wouldn't change his team for anything, as he found them to be his family, a rather dysfunctional family, but it was still a family. Suddenly feeling himself being nudged, he shook his head away from those thoughts before focusing on his Cinderace, who was the offender of the nudging he felt as he saw her in the movement of making another nudge. She looked like she was contemplating something, with her eyes slightly glazed, but her body language was clearly displaying her nervousness. "Sorry, lost in thoughts," Naruto explained, rubbing the back of his head with a sheepish smile on his face. He did have a tendency to lose himself in thought when something came to mind or something random like the personality of his Pokemon came into his mind. Sin. Using rather exaggerated hand movements, Cinderace was trying to explain to her beloved trainer what she was feeling and what she wanted. However, even with all of that, all she got was a confused look. Pouting and huffing lightly, she contemplated her next move and whether or not she wanted to do it. Her choice was made quickly at that. In a blink of an eye, Cinderace suddenly grabbed Naruto's shoulders before pulling with all of her might to bring him down closer to her level, ignoring the shocked yelp that escaped his mouth. Their lips lammed together from the force displayed on Cinderace's end. After the initial shock passed from Naruto, he realized that Cinderace had her own taste. Despite her being a Pokemon, it still had this hint of flavor upon her lips. Whereas Marnie had this distinct taste of cinnamon and cream from all the cinnamon rolls and shortcake that she ate from the cafes around the region, Cindy had this distinct taste of spice, and it really went well with her passion when it came to battling and improving. Of course, it felt weird to him, kissing a Pokemon and having mainly fur being smooshed against his own lips and maybe a hint of a tongue when the kiss first happened, but he could say that it was a pleasurable experience and something that he was interested to see if his Gardevoir or Zoroark had different flavors to them that coincided with their personalities. Gently pulling away after a few more moments after the rather passionate kiss, Naruto gently stroked the cheek of Cinderace. Despite the height difference, she had actually managed to wrap her legs around his waist, effectively locking herself onto his body. He could quite literally feel the heat coming off of her, and that wasn't just because she was a fire type. That was great. Naruto spoke out, continuing to stroke her cheek, getting a pleasant coo from her. Thank you, I'm sorry for not reciprocating the feelings earlier, I just didn't want to be unfaithful towards Marnie. He further added, before stopping his little ministrations and placing his forehead on hers. He felt that Cinderace was warming up once again, only this time, he could feel the heat rushing to his head as he noticed that she seemed to be blushing heavily. However, he felt her harem fan try to look away, only for her to realize that she couldn't as his forehead was resting on hers. Feeling her untangle from around his waist, she shuffled away a little, bringing her forehead away from his. He still couldn't believe the flexibility that Cindy possessed. Sometimes he believed that Marnie was taking lessons from his Pokemon sometimes. As Cinder looked forward to the vast field that was used for training, she suddenly had an idea, and that was shown from the way her ears perked up and twitched lightly, along with her little nose twitching from the prospect about what she wanted. Quickly springing up from the small boulder they were on, much to Naruto's confusion, she suddenly grabbed hold of his arm and started pulling with all of her might for him to get up as well. Seeing as how Cinderace wanted him to get up, he allowed himself to be pulled up from his position. However, he didn't even get a chance to question what she wanted, as he was once again pulled along by her with frightening strength that only a female could have when they were on a mission. He blinked a few times as he realized where she was dragging him towards. It was of a running track that had been outlined with the help of special markings and paint, and it wasn't turfed, just outlined over the grass, as it was more natural that way, and there was less chance for injury or discomfort when running upon it when his Pokemon or Marnie's Pokemon wanted to, or in this case, if any barefooted humans wanted to. Looking from the track to Cindy, who was bouncing on the balls of her feet in one of the many lanes that were outlined, he suddenly knew why she dragged him from the small boulder to the track. "You want me to train with you?" he asked, having a slight feeling that she knew the answer. Chirping and excitedly calling her name out many times, she enthusiastically nodded her head. Chuckling to himself, Naruto discarded the jacket that he was wearing and dropped it unceremoniously on the ground below, revealing that he was wearing a simple singlet underneath. "I see," he muttered out, doing some stretching so he doesn't injure himself from the upcoming exercise, which will more than likely be very challenging and very heavy on his muscles. "So, everything physical you can think of?" he asked. Nodding her head once again, Cinderace suddenly took on a stance that he had seen before many times. Well, it was a runner's stance when the athletes were about to launch off the bricks. It was modified for herself, as she was using the small pads on her feet to keep her grip once she tilted her body forward and brought herself into the stance. Shaking his head, Naruto got into the same position, only starting lower to have more momentum when he started to push forward with his body. Without even speaking and only by chance did a stray falling leaf from one of the many trees landed in front of them was the signal for them to start. Within a heartbeat, both Cinderace and Naruto launched from their positions and started to pick up the pace for their little exercise. While it may be only a small warm-up for the next things to come, they wanted to push each other to the limits, as there was always room to improve. What they both didn't know was the fact they were being watched, and they were being watched by none other than Gardevoir, who was smiling happily at seeing her Pokeball and sister in all but species and blood being so happy with the one they loved. She could feel the love lingering off between them and the bond they had between them strengthened to whole new levels. All she could hope for was the same to happen to not only herself when she had the chance, but for the resident trickster and her other sister in all but species and blood. Zoroark. While she knew it was wrong, she also knew that her trainer was someone who didn't like to make anyone upset. Instead, he liked to make everyone as happy as much as he could for within his power. Shaking her head, she turned rather elegantly and walked away silently, leaving the newly formed pair to themselves to strengthen the bond. After all, she would get her chance at a later date, and she was a patient girl. End chapter. Chapter 3 Gardevoir's Sneaky Surprise. Sighing to himself as he entered the house after having his early morning workout with Cinderace, he really had to give it to her, as she had stamina for days, and she had the determination to continue going on, even when she was getting tired. Even when he told her to stop to recover for a moment, she ignored his wishes and continued going on, pushing herself to the absolute limit. Although he had a feeling she was showing him just how much she could do, and how much her own physical strength and attributes meant as she could last longer in battle. Wiping some sweat from his brow, he sighed in relief as his bare feet rested upon the tiled floor of the kitchen. For him, the feeling of the cold tiled floor on his bare feet after an intense workout and strenuous exercise really felt great, although the one thing that he was excited for was having a nice lukewarm shower to wash away the grime, dirt and sweat that was covering his body. Ahem. Snapping his eyes open as he heard the distinct sound of his girlfriend clearing her throat to garner his attention, he gave her his fullest attention, while also appreciating her body and what she wore this particular morning. Marnie was wearing a rather interesting choice of clothing after their little bout last night, which also included another round after they had dinner, then followed up within the shower, as they cleaned themselves from the bodily fluids they were leaking. Although she had a reputation of being rather fierce and cold towards her opponents, mainly to help throw them off and for mistakes to be made, she was currently the complete opposite of that, as she was rubbing one of her eyes with her wrist to get some of the sleep out of her eyes, and for the fact that her hair was rather poofy and fluffed up from just waking up. Gotta love the morning hairdo that some people get. Let it be known that Marnie did indeed have stamina that was nothing to laugh at, nothing like Naruto's own unnatural amount of stamina, but she was getting there, and she also loved the feeling of being full with Naruto inside of her. Sometimes you really got to look out for the quiet ones or maybe even the tsundere ones, like he just learnt with Cinderace, except instead of intercourse, it was intense physical activity. The piece of clothing hardly covered anything and showed a rather toned stomach and cute belly button for anyone to see only for Naruto's eyes, and she was wearing a rather cute pair of white frilled panties. She had no shame for being dressed like this within their house, nor having any shame when Naruto's eyes were glued to her near naked lower half for longer than they needed to be. Morning, Haim. Naruto greeted out, using some of the linguistic culture from Acridiac City, as he greeted his loved one. To him, some of the stuff that he learned from the language just fit perfectly, and he found himself growing fond of the terms that they used. Mornin, she murmured out, placing a fist in front of her mouth as she gave a rather cute yawn. I see you must have had some fun, I could hear Cinderace's chirping from upstairs. She pointed out, giving him what seemed to be a small smirk mixed with a tired smile. She really wasn't that much of a morning person. She was somewhat irritable and depending on the day or how she felt, she was sometimes rather slow to actually wake up and sometimes acted near zombie-like. However, to Naruto that just made her even more cuter and made him love her even more. Blushing brightly at the innuendo she just did, he shook his head at that. It wasn't like that, just some physical exercise after I confirmed her feelings for me. He said, shaking his head at the fact he didn't catch just how loud Cinderace was. If she could wake Marnie up from her sleep, and she was a rather heavy sleeper, did you sleep well? He questioned after he managed to control his blush on his cheeks. Heading towards her, he gently shooed her away towards the dining room table so he could do her morning kitchen rituals while she tried to keep awake, and that meant that he helped her with creating some tea to help wake her up, along with having to start on the toast from the toaster. She wasn't a fan of oatmeal, nor did she like waffles all that much, and all of this was done because he knew that she could be rather ditzy in the morning and that it led to some near accidents occurring. So he took it upon himself to actually do the stuff that she wanted herself while she sat down at the small dining room table so she could try to wake up without putting herself at risk. It was alright, although Cinder did wake me up a few times. Still feeling a little sore from last night, but I'll manage. She spoke out, slurring her words as she still wasn't quite awake yet. Thankfully I should only have one challenger today, so I should be home early. She said with a small groan as she sunk into her chair. Sometimes she wished that someday she didn't have a challenger at all. She would much rather spend the day cuddling up in bed and under a nice warm quilt or spending some time with their Pokemon. Well, I don't have much on my plate today, that means I can come and watch your battle whilst giving you some moral support. Naruto said, grabbing a small plate from one of the many cupboards in the kitchen and prepared himself, waiting for the toast to come flying up and out of the toaster. Glancing towards Naruto, she had a light frown on her face as she did so. You don't have to cheer me on, you can spend some time looking for people worthy of the Elite Four or maybe have some free time, Arceus knows that you deserve it. She softly spoke out, not wanting to make Naruto change his plans just for her. As Naruto was about to retort, he was stopped as he had a mental countdown happening in his head for what was to come next. 3, 2, 1. He counted down, almost smiling as he knew what was to happen next. Pop. True to his mental countdown down to milliseconds, Naruto saw the toast eject out of the toaster, and in a sense of style and dramatic flair, Naruto quickly brought the plate underneath the two pieces of golden toast, and they landed perfectly onto the plate with little resistance. Another odd thing that Marnie didn't like her toast to be that well cooked, with it only being done just enough to have hints of gold within the bread, along with the crust being just a tad crunchy. In other words, Marnie liked her toast to be placed in the toaster for 2.5 minutes. Any more than that, then she wouldn't enjoy it as much. Turning around and giving a small bow that really wasn't needed and only in means to show that he had caught some flying bread on a plate, he turned back around towards the kitchen bench to spread her favorite topping upon the pieces of toast, and that was strawberry jam. He didn't notice the way that Marnie rolled her eyes at the eccentricities that he had sometimes when it came to certain things, however, that didn't stop the small smile on her face, as her eyes were glued to his form as he hummed to himself. She didn't stare at his behind as he swayed to the beat that he was humming. Certainly not. Okay, maybe she was, but that was besides the point. In timely fashion, as Naruto finished spreading the strawberry jam on the pieces of toast, the tea kettle started to whistle, meaning that it was ready. Seemingly zooming around the kitchen without fail, Naruto turned off the kettle with a small push of a button before he grabbed an oven mitt to prevent burning himself from the heated item. Coming back over to a teacup that Marnie had already set out and placed a tea bag in before he took over, he gently and carefully poured some of the steaming hot water into the cup, mixing the water and tea bags together. Letting it sit for a few moments, Naruto then got a small teaspoon and stirred it around, making sure to evenly disperse the flavor about and to try and cool it down further. Using his other hand, he grabbed the string that remained outside and dipped the bag in and out of the steaming liquid a few more times, trying to get as much flavor out as possible. Once that was finished, Naruto tossed the used tea bag through the kitchen, where it landed perfectly within the metal trash can with a small thud. Score. He muttered to himself, pumping his fist in the air with the great shot he just took, before finally placing the teacup on a tiny platter with a small indent that would allow the cup to be securely placed. "Breakfast is served, my harem," Naruto said, putting on his best butler voice as he could as he brought the breakfast over to his girlfriend. "Why, thank you, my kind fellow," Marnie tittered out, grabbing his hand and placing a small kiss on the back of his hand. Chuckling merrily, Naruto took a seat next to Marnie, making sure to lean his leg against her own and gently lean on her, making sure that she could still move her arm properly to enjoy her breakfast and tea. "Anyway, back to your concerns," Naruto said, before gently grasping Marnie's arm. "I may have found 2 possible candidates for the Elite Four, but they are currently in a tournament in the Kalos region, and I will have to talk to their regional professors so I can make contact with them." He stated, "To your second point, I can spend some time with my Pokemon after your match. I want to cheer on my girlfriend and hopefully give her the power to win her match." He finished before placing his forehead on hers. As he did so, she giggled lightly from the sensations that was sending small shivers throughout her body, and that was because Naruto kept on opening and closing his eyes, causing his eyelashes to tickle her skin as they moved with his facial movements. "Gotta love the butterfree kisses as they had been called throughout the world. I love you," she murmured out, giving a quick kiss to Naruto's nose as that was the only place that she could reach, plus, she liked giving him kisses on the nose, much like he loved to flick her on the nose when she was acting all mopey. "I love you too." They stayed like that for a few moments before Marnie crinkled her nose as she playfully shoved him back. "Go have a shower, you stink of sweat," she said, giving a small playful look towards him. Chuckling at the change of attitude in his girlfriend, he looked down at her plate and noticed that she was halfway done with her toast and still had half a cup of tea remaining. "Want to join me?" he cheekily questioned, waggling his eyebrows in a suggestive manner. Huffing at that, normally she would join him, mainly to save water and fool around, but she wasn't in the mood for it yet. It was too early, and plus they might get carried away, and that was not a good thing, not this time. She said, however, another thought entered her mind, "Maybe tonight. If you are a good boy," she added on, smiling rather mischievously at him. Giving a playful salute to his girlfriend, Naruto grinned at the prospect for tonight before he quickly turned on his heel and ran towards upstairs where the bathroom was located, leaving Marnie all alone to finish her toast and tea, and using this downtime, she was thinking of some new strategies for the battle to throw off her challenger. As Naruto entered the bathroom, which was rather spacious considering the room it was, he placed his new change of clothes where they had no chance of getting wet with splashes that could escape from the shower curtain. He also made sure to hang a nice woolen towel along the towel holder, which was located on the wall opposite from the shower, so it too had no chance to get soaked before he used it to dry his body. He flicked the switch along the wall by the door, which was now closed but not locked, to turn the fan on to prevent the steam from fogging the mirrors or causing mist to form to make the tiles all slippery. Nodding to himself once he heard the fan word alive, along with the distinct feel of it pushing the air around the room, he went over towards the shower and opened the large glass pane door. Feeling the cold metal hit his fingertips, he couldn't help but let out a delightful shiver. Quickly turning the shower valves to unleash some water from the shower head, Naruto kept his hands under the water, waiting for the water to warm up to his ideal temperature. It didn't take long, maybe half a minute at most to get the water to the correct temperature, and only a few more turns of the shower valves for it to become ideal. Sighing to himself, Naruto started to undress, making sure that he put the dirty and sweaty clothes in the hamper for them to be washed at a later date. As he stood under the lukewarm water poured down upon his body, making him moan at the feeling of the water soaking into his skin. It also didn't take long for the glass around the shower to fog and mist up, obscuring the chance for Naruto to look out of the glass to see if Marnie entered to use the toilet. As he was enjoying the feeling of the water pouring down his body, he started to lather himself with some soap to get a nice fragrance onto his body, as it also took away the grime that might have been left behind when the water couldn't dislodge it from his skin. He groaned once more as he felt a pair of dainty hands start rubbing his shoulders, getting his muscles to loosen up even further. The pleasure was so great that his body slumped forward slightly as he closed his eyes to enjoy the feeling. It didn't take long for him to notice that the hands were no longer rubbing his shoulders, and instead he felt the distinct feeling of a shower loofah being gently rubbed against his backside. "Marnie. I thought you said you weren't in the mood for this." He groaned out, still groaning as he felt the loofah hit all the right spots and dig in at the right places. Snapping his eyes open at the sound that definitely wasn't his girlfriend's, he suddenly spun around to face whatever it was that it called. Sadly, in his panic the quick and sudden movement caused him to lose balance and fall backwards. Wham! Fuck! Naruto cried out, cradling the back of his head. He could feel the tears start to form in his eyes as he rubbed the back of his head in an attempt to wash the pain away. Fuck stung like a bitch. He muttered out, trying his best to not scream out in agony. While it did hurt like hell, he didn't want to cause any additional trouble with Marnie. She already had a lot on her plate with thinking of strategies to use and counter with for her battle today. Squinting his eyes open, he looked up, despite the sheer amount of pain it caused him, and saw that he had smashed his head against one of the shower valves. That was when he also noticed that small red droplets were sprinkling down upon him. Pulling one of his hands away from the back of his head, he brought it away and grimaced at what he saw. His hand was covered in blood, and now that he could concentrate somewhat again, he could feel the liquid dripping down his neck and back. Groaning in discomfort, Naruto glanced towards the area in which he once stood and saw two slender white legs peeking out from what looks like a gown. "Anna?" he questioned, blinking away the tears that were forming in the corner of his eyes. Gardevoir. He could hear the frantic cries of Gardevoir as she was panicking and was now crouching down and nursing his head with her hands. "I'm alright, just in a little pain." He spoke out, however, that didn't stop the fretting that his Gardevoir was doing right now. Gardevoir is a bipedal humanoid Pokemon whose body resembles a flowing gown. Most of its body is white, but its hair, arms, and the underside of its gown are green. Its hair curls over its face and down the sides of its head. Behind its red eyes are short spikes, resembling a masquerade mask. It has long arms with 3 fingers on each hand and slender white legs. A red fin-like horn extends from its chest, and a shorter, more rounded horn extends from the back. A band of green on its chest extends to the center of the front horn and connects to its sleeve-like arms. Although, currently she had water dropping from her form as she stepped under the shower head, soaking not only herself, but it also caused some interesting things to happen to her gown, as it matted down, hugging her form, as the water was too heavy for it to have that natural outwards flare to it. It was odd, but it was understandable, as her red eyes were currently filled with panic and a little fear. After all, she was the cause for her trainer and love interest to be injured, all because she had scared him and not warned him of her presence. Even seeing him naked wasn't enough to knock her out of her stupor, not even seeing his flaccid member out of the corner of her eyes was enough to drag her attention away from trying her best to heal him. "Anna, use heal pulse," he commented, knowing that his Gardevoir was freaking out and not thinking properly. He couldn't help but smile. Well, they might be Pokemon, he would say it once, and he would say it again. No, in fact he would never change his mind about it. His Pokemon were his family, a rather disjointed and rather eccentric family, but a family all the same, and he was glad that he could share his family with Marnie. Anna simply palmed her face, an embarrassed blush on her face, as she forgot about that one move that she could do. Placing one of her hands on the bleeding area of his head, a light green glow surrounded her hand and the injured area of her head before it started to pulse and ripple around his skin. As the effects of the move washed over him, Naruto couldn't help but moan at the feeling that it washed over his body. It was like his head had been wrapped around in one of the most woolen blankets that had ever been made, along with a tingling in his skin, felt like he had been doused in honey minus the smell, and it honestly felt amazing. He idly felt one of Gardevoir's hands moving around in a circle-like fashion, as wherever her hand went, the feeling followed, and it felt like the blanket was gently rubbing around the sore area of his head. He could also feel the small bump that had been forming on his head since he slammed into the valves earlier start to vanish, leaving no trace that it was there to begin with. He also felt the blood that was dripping down his neck and back stop, with it seemingly disappearing once the pulse rippled down his spine. After what felt like a solid few minutes under the effect and the warmth of the attack, it was merely a few seconds the feeling was washed away as Gardevoir pulled her hand aside and let the move die down before she levitated back a few paces, not even caring that her entire form was soaking wet. "Thank you, Anna," Naruto said, smiling lightly as he ran a hand over where his injury was, and much to his relief, it was gone, like it wasn't even there in the first place. Instead of Gardevoir replying, she clapped her hands together in front of her face to try and hide the growing smile and faint blush on her cheeks as she sent the current emotions she was feeling directly towards her trainer and love interest for the bond they shared. An interesting fact with psychic-type Pokémon was that they could send their emotions towards their trainers or ones they trusted most. The only way that someone would be able to feel the sudden rush of emotions was if either the bond they shared was exceptionally strong or if the trainer or the receiver had any form of psychic power, whether it be dormant in their body or they were actively training it. Naruto did indeed have psychic potential, but it laid dormant within himself, but he did have an exceptionally strong bond with all of his Pokémon, meaning that he did fulfill the requirements for the emotion transfer to work on him. Suddenly stopping in place as he felt something else wash over him, he couldn't help but chuckle as his body was rushed with foreign emotions, ones that weren't his own, and he felt all the happiness that Gardevoir was currently feeling, along with a smidge of sorrow, apparently still a little upset with herself for causing him to be in that situation in the first place. "Hey, none of that, it was just an accident," he admonished lightly, flashing a smile and moving his head and neck without any problems to show that he was indeed fine. Despite being naked and having his Gardevoir to see everything, he wasn't embarrassed with the situation at all. If she had already seen him naked, then why would he be embarrassed now? When he was on his journey and when they were out in the wilderness and there were no towns or cities nearby where he could shower, Naruto often used lakes or rivers to clean himself and his Pokémon often were out and about and sometimes if the situation arose for it, they often joined him with bathing and swam around. At one place where they relaxed, swam and bathed under the waterfall was a nice place. It was just a darn shame that he forgot where the place was, it was a treasure. He even tried to ask others about the place, however, all he received was odd looks, and some people thought he was crazy because the place didn't exist weird. War. Shaking his head from those thoughts, Naruto turned once again making sure to be a little slower to avoid another accident and turned off both valves for the shower, causing the cascading water to slow down to mere dribbles before they stopped as well. Sighing a little as he felt the warmth disappear and to only return as a slight chill, he stepped out of the shower and started drying himself off with a towel. "So, Gardevoir, any reason for the surprise shower entrance?" Naruto questioned, drying his hair with a soft towel, making sure to close his eyes as he didn't want the remnants of the conditioner he used to enter his eyes. That shit hurt like hell and was irritating beyond belief to get out. Frowning lightly as he didn't hear her verbal reply, nor did he feel her sending her emotions through a transfer through their bond, he wrapped a towel around his waist to try and dry it without doing the motions and turned around to face her. Once again, he felt his lips come into contact with another pair. He nearly gawked in surprise, but any noise that would have left his mouth would have been muffled beyond doubt as his Gardevoir pulled him into a searing kiss, one that would be worthy of Cinderace earlier. Maybe that was where the normally shy Gardevoir got this idea from. Unlike Cinderace who tasted of spice upon fire kiss, Gardevoir was basically the complete opposite, having the distinct taste and slight smell of strawberries and vanilla. It was an interesting combination, but it did taste nice in his opinion. As Gardevoir's lips came into contact with his own, it was then he felt a surge of emotion storm through his body, and it was definitely coming from Gardevoir. He could feel the love that she had for him, and now that she was given the go-ahead by Marnie, she was finally acting upon it, with hope being another emotion that was strongly linked with the love he was feeling. Throughout the surge of love and hope that he felt coming from her, he also felt something else, and that was concern. Maybe she was concerned that she wasn't kissing correctly, or maybe she was concerned that he wouldn't return the feelings that she had, and the relationship and bond they had would be destroyed and could never return to what it once was. Mentally shaking his head at the last concern that Gardevoir was showing, he decided to return the kiss with vigor to get rid of her concern entirely, only leaving her being able to focus on the love and care that he was giving back to her. As he deepened the kiss, he pulled Gardevoir closer to his body although he was praying that she didn't get too handsy or footsy with him being nearly naked before closing his eyes to enjoy the feeling that was coming from her lips. He may have found another new flavor combination that he would try out when cooking some cakes for Marnie. He also idly wondered what Zoroark's kiss would taste like. Because to him, it seemed like the personality of the Pokémon played into what they tasted like when they gave him a kiss, and since Zoroark was a rather interesting wildcard, he had no idea. Peeking his eyes open, Naruto noticed that Gardevoir had engulfed herself in a tinge of psychic power, allowing herself to levitate up closer to his height to negate the rather large height difference they shared. After a few more moments of kissing, Naruto gently pulled away in order to regain some oxygen within his system. As he did so, he noticed that Gardevoir had placed herself back on the ground and had a serene smile on her face and a rather healthy blush upon her cheeks. It was also rather cute how she seemed to sway from side to side lightly in a form of excitement. Enjoy that? Naruto questioned, wanting to know if that kiss was worth it for Gardevoir. Instead of receiving a verbal answer, he had to quickly brace himself as Anna shot herself towards his body, where she crashed into it and hugged him tightly, and considering she was much shorter than him height-wise, her head was at a perfect height to rest in the middle of his chest and just below his sternum. He could feel the heat of the blush that Gardevoir had on her cheeks, he could also feel her heartbeat and how quickly it was pounding against her chest. Smiling at the reaction, he gently wrapped his arms around her and returned the hug, looking down at the Gardevoir and seeing how content she was in her position, he placed a small kiss atop her head. "Come on, let's get you dried up," he murmured. Pulling herself away, Gardevoir gave a shy smile as she realized she was still soaked from standing in the shower and had made his chest wet again, although she couldn't help but lick her lips at the way the water glistened on his body and seemed to make him even more handsome than before. Looking around the room for something to use, she noticed another towel that was resting on a towel rack and concentrating on it, her eyes glowed a soft purple color as did the towel, and she brought it over towards Naruto, where it fell into his outstretched hands. As he straightened the towel, he made his way over towards Gardevoir before gently rubbing the fabric along her body, not strong enough to hurt her, but just strong enough where it could actually use friction to dry her off from the shower. Let it be known that Gardevoir possibly fell asleep under the soft and tender movements that her trainer was doing to dry her off. End chapter. What if neglected Naruto x lusamine harem Pokémon end here, and thanks for watching my video till the end.